Hello, Flirties, and welcome to this brand new episode of Flirtations, the conversation I have for you today with Dr. Lisa Wade, all about hookup culture. Whether you are participating, currently have participated, feel like it's not for you, you've been in and out, I think you're going to value this conversation, get lots of new insights and some interesting takeaways about what is hookup culture even? How does it work? How is it about saying screw the rules, and yet we've just replaced quote unquote traditional rules with new rules about what's supposed to happen? It's very interesting. There are some power dynamics, some gender norms coming into the conversation. I just love this conversation, and I think you will too. But before we get there, thank you. Thank you so much for tuning in, for listening, for streaming. I really appreciate you being here, being a part of these conversations that we have on Flirtations. Yes, about flirting and dating, but oh, so much more about how we form relationships, about how we connect, what's happening about the systems, right? The structures in place, kind of those invisible forces that shape how we do it all, influence how we do all of this. Thank you so much for being here. Please rate, review, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. If you have, thank you kindly. If you haven't, now's a chance to leave 5 stars, maybe a review on Apple, a comment, a thumbs up on YouTube. Yes, even a comment on Spotify. Thank you so much for being here. All right, now let's get into the full interview with Dr. Lisa Wade. Coming up on this episode of Flirtations, we're joined by Dr. Lisa Wade, a sociologist, assistant professor at Tulane University, and author of the landmark book, American Hookup, The New Culture of Sex on Campus. Her groundbreaking research draws from the intimate, real voices of college students and reveals that hookup culture isn't just about casual sex. It's a social system with its own rules, hierarchies, and pressures. We'll explore how this culture took hold and the surprising ways it shapes how we all date and connect, because we know hookup culture ain't just limited to the college campus. We'll also look at trends like why Gen Z is having less sex than previous generations, how gender and power dynamics still influence intimacy, and what might be replacing the hookup script. So, whether you've lived through hookup culture, opted out entirely, or are curious about how it's evolving today, this is a conversation about desire, connection, and the cultural forces that shape both. Let's do this, Flirties, and meet Dr. Wade.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, Flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt. Delulu is the Salulu. Expert on the flirt.
Hey, Flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt.
Flirties, on the show today is Dr. Lisa Wade. Dr. Wade is a sociologist, assistant professor at Tulane University, and author of the landmark book, American Hookup, The New Culture of Sex on Campus, here today to have a conversation with us about hookup culture, dating trends, and the role sex plays in forming relationships. Hi, Dr. Wade, and welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on this good old show we call Flirtations. Appreciate you making the time to record today.
No problem. I'm really excited to be here.
All right. How about let's get going right away. We're going to be focusing on your book, American Hookup, The New Culture of Sex on Campus, as we get into some dating trends and really talking about sex, one of the Flirties' perhaps favorite topics. But before we get there, we got to get to know you a little bit and the work you do.
Oh, sure. I mean, for this book, you have to go all the way back to college, I guess.
Yeah.
I took a sociology of human sexuality class when I was a freshman in college.
Okay.
And it just blew my mind. Even though I had probably some of the best sex education that Americans had ever gotten, because I grew up during the HIV era in California.
Yes.
But I was still stunned at how much I didn't know that I should know. I needed to know, that everyone needed to know. And so I became really interested in like peer sex education in college, and I was doing that where I was like, just a campus sex nerd. I was trying to get people to wear condoms and have healthy relationships.
Practice safe sex, everybody.
Yeah. And what I didn't know was that I was probably right there at the beginning of hookup cultures on college campuses. This was probably the moment where it was transitioning from what had once been like kind of the going steady model that kids invented in the 1950s was still pretty much in place. Not that people didn't have casual sex, they did, but it wasn't considered like the route to relationship. And so that was probably changing right as I was in school. And then I went from there to get a master's degree, an interdisciplinary master's degree in human sexuality from NYU. And then I went and got my PhD, and I didn't focus on hookup culture in my graduate work, but when I got my first job as a professor, and I was teaching sexuality-related classes to students, that's when, like, it really started to hit me that they were experiencing something really different than what I had experienced.
All right, let's get into it. Very interesting. A fellow sociologist. That was my undergraduate major as well in college. Pivoting now to help people with their flirting lives and dating lives. But I think sociology still plays a key role in everything I do.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the best.
It's a great perspective to have. All right, the book, American Hookup. I want to talk a little bit about your research process. And so you went through the journal entries of 101 college students, I think all first-year students on different American university campuses. Two. All right. Two different American university campuses. And I just would love to hear about some of the themes that you saw come out of those journal entries. And I'm also curious, the other part of this question is some of the initial thoughts you had, like hypotheses you had, maybe what you thought you would discover.
Yeah, so my data comes from basically like 1 semester length diaries from these 101 students. Okay. And then I also, scoured the existing internet for anything students had written themselves, like for college newspapers and stuff like that, to try to like broaden from the 2 campuses I studied. And then there was also a lot of other research already on hookup culture that I could pull from as well, and a big quantitative data set. So we called it American Hookup because it really did generalize. But we had already known about certain kinds of like acute crises on college campuses related to sexuality, and so the big one being sexual violence, but also bias in the erotic marketplace. So racism and classism and prejudice against people that weren't presenting in gender conventional ways, etc. And we knew too, right, that there was some emotional trauma coming out that wasn't directly related to sexual violence, but just the experiences in general. Okay. And of course, STIs and things like that. And so I think the valuable thing that came out of my research is that I was able to portray the particular hookup culture we have on college campuses these days, because it's not all hookup cultures are the same. Right. But this one has a particular nature, and I was able to sort of drill down into the nature of that hookup culture and figure out what was a kind of umbrella cause of all of these different crises we were seeing. So I was able to kind of level up a bit and identify what was really behind it. All right. So in this research really coming about, like, how far are we into the digital era when you were doing this research? Yeah, so at the time I did my research, the only people using dating apps consistently on campus were gay men. No surprise there. I guess how else are we supposed to find each other? This is why we use dating apps, because we're in a thin market, right? So there was just, a statistically smaller number of gay men on campus, and Grindr had come out, and so people were using Grindr, but people weren't really using heterosexuals, and women who are seeking women were not necessarily using apps at the time. Yeah, because the dating apps, I mean, before you really had to have the desktop, right? You were like Match.com, something like that, using your computer, which probably a lot of college students were not doing. In particular, if you're a man looking for a woman on a college campus or vice versa, there are plenty of easier routes to find them. I mean, most of the parties are organized around facilitating hookups. So if that's what you're interested in, there was really no need to use the apps. I studied hookup culture during COVID, and then there was a lot of app use. Big shift. And now these days, what the research is showing is that if students are using apps, outside of COVID, then they're probably doing it to find dates and not hookups. Because, again, men seeking women, vice versa, on college campus, easy to find a hookup just by going to a party. But if you're looking for a date, that's a lot harder to get on campus. And so they're using it as a romantic pathway, but not as much a sexual pathway.
All right. And how would you, in your work, define hookup? Giving some context
good question.
to the word, yeah?
Good question. So I would define a hookup as some measure of sexual activity that is engaged in with the premise that it's casual and not emotional. And I think that the ambiguity, like what exactly did you do? If you say we hooked up, it doesn't really tell us a lot. Is very strategic. So it kind of allows there to be a big question mark that people can fill in or not.
Yeah. All right. I think we're getting grounded, Dr. Wade. I've just got a couple more questions. The researcher, the sociologist in me is like, we got a couple more pieces of information to get to. Did your research primarily focus on women dating men, more heteronormative relationships, or was there some diversity there?
So the dominant hookup culture on most college campuses is going to be for men seeking women and vice versa.
Okay.
But my study included everybody, and I actually I think it was like a quarter of my students were queer of some kind. And about half were students of color.
Awesome.
A high percentage of students coming from working class backgrounds. And in my study, and this is pretty consistent with other research too, about a third of students weren't hooking up at all. And that's important because if hooking up is a culture, it means you have to be dealing with it even if you're not hooking up. And that was an important part of what I found.
Definitely. And we're definitely going to be coming back to that point. Several points you've already brought up. What colleges or college campuses were you looking at? Were they like Big Ten schools, small liberal arts? Yeah, what were they looking like?
My specific research, so like the qualitative data, the kind of heart of the book, comes from a secular liberal arts school in the Southwest. And a religiously affiliated liberal arts school in the South.
All right, cool. I think that pretty broadly represents a lot of campuses you're going to find across the U.S. for sure, right?
Well, I was lucky that there was a lot more research that I could borrow from,
Oh my gosh. All right. Let's get into it, Dr. Wade. I'm really interested, and I want to hear about this. One of the points you bring forth in the book is this hookup culture as a way to form relationships. And I want to kind of balance that with a lot of just news we're seeing about how Gen Z is having a lot less sex. And so how can we start to reconcile those 2 points where if sex is a way to form relationships, but we have a whole demographic of people that research says are having less sex, it should indicate that they're also having fewer relationships.
Yeah.
So I just want to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think this is a really important facet. So we had, starting in the 1950s, this idea of going steady, which is this sort of charming, kind of sweet idea that two people like each other, they go on a date and they're nervous, they share a milkshake, right? And then actually, to the chagrin of many of the adults in the 1950s, their emotional and sexual intimacy increases apace, right?
Okay.
And this is the sexual culture that hookup culture replaces. So hookup culture comes in and it says, no, what you should be doing, and I'll speak to college campuses, what you should be doing is having casual sex with no emotional connection with as many hot people as you can, because this is your moment to really sort of explore, have fun, but not necessarily have intimate bonds with other people in this way. In practice, what happens is that sometimes people hook up and then they start hooking up on the regular, and then they start perhaps seeing each other outside of parties and having conversations. They start talking or hanging out, whatever language students use. Sometimes they end up entering something that some students call a exclusive but non-romantic relationship. So we're exclusive but not in a relationship.
That's almost a new one for me. It sounds like situationship land in a sense. Friends with benefits.
If they get really brave, they have that labeling talk, right? The defining relationship talk.
Yes.
So it's this very awkward situation where everyone's pretending not to be interested romantically in each other, but some people are. And if you want to go along all of those baby steps towards a relationship, then you have to start breaking the rules of hookup culture.
Okay.
And students tend to do it very gently, very carefully, in little tiny ways, to get some reassurance that maybe we are making this transition. And so people do end up in relationships in hookup culture, but hooking up has co-opted the whole process.
Yeah.
Okay, so students having less sex, getting in less relationships. Hookup culture, its particular nature on campuses these days is, well, the easiest way to say it is that it's organized around the stereotype of what a man might want.
Okay.
So that's the nature of the hookup culture. And so everyone, men and women alike, are like, acting as if all they want is to just have sex and walk away. And that is a difficult way for some people to feel comfortable with sex.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are more comfortable with the 1950s model, where they proceed apace, the sexual and emotional stuff. But not everybody is comfortable with just jumping into the deep end, especially when a lot of these people are virgins when they start college, right? They're new to this.
Yeah.
And so I think hookup culture has directly led to a decline in how many young people are having sex, because it's a little scary and it doesn't suit everybody. And if they're not having sex, then their likelihood of getting in a relationship does go down. And so I think those things are all related. Even though it sounds like hookup culture is the opposite of a sex recession, I think they're entwined.
That makes a lot of sense, and I definitely think they are too. I mean, it's been a minute, Dr. Wade, since I've been on a college campus as a student. But I think back to like my experience of I came into it with very little sexual experience. And at the time, now knowing I more identify as a demisexual, where I really want that emotional connection, that emotional intimacy and vulnerability before I even feel safe and comfortable exploring some type of physical intimacy connection with someone, but not being aware of that at the time and then trying to fit in, right? So really just going all in, rushing towards sex, which is where I'm going with this next question, because it sounds like going back to the 50s, 60s, this going steady, more traditional, quote unquote, style of dating, it's like the dating is still happening. It's the sex is coming first, right? Which is so interesting when you jump towards that. And now it's almost like you have to backtrack and like, oh, what's your name?
Yes.
It's such an interesting way of getting to know someone, yes, very intimately before you know even who they are.
Yes, and I've heard students call the 1950s style reverse dating. For them, it's backwards.
Oh my God. Dr. Wade, I can't. Reverse dating? All right. So let's then, stay here for a moment. Let's say we're in the 50s, 60s, and I want to talk about the sexual revolution, the feminist revolution, and how that might tie into this American hookup culture that we have, and some of the observations and takes that came from your research.
Sure. So we have in the 1960s and 70s all of these anti-institutional movements where we're trying to free individuals from interference, right? So we have the sexual revolution, we have gay liberation, we have the women's movement, and these three things come together. And feminists are fighting really at the time for two things, and this becomes really important. They are fighting for the right to enter male spheres and to adopt masculinity, right? So they want to be able to play soccer and become doctors and all that good stuff. And they want to be allowed to be competitive and ambitious, and they want to make money. And they want all the things that men have, right?
Yeah.
So they want access to those things. But they also want everybody to sit up and notice that the things that women are doing that they're held responsible for, and femininity, all those things are valuable too. And so those things should be well compensated and well regarded and all those things. And so what happens is as these movements progress, the feminists get the first thing, but they don't get the second thing.
Okay.
So women kind of start getting access to male spheres. They're allowed to work some masculinity into their personality characteristics, but we don't start to value femininity more. In fact, over time, we value it less
Less. Yeah.
And so hookup culture arrives right as the kids of those movements, right, start to get to college campuses around the mid 1990s, and they've been told now their whole lives, these girls, right, boys have been told to be boys because being a girl is still devalued, right, but girls, they've been taught you can do anything you want to do in life, and by that they know what their parents mean is you can do things that boys do. And so hookup culture is just everybody, as I mentioned, sort of trying to embody this stereotypically masculine way of being sexual because that's what's valued. And we still look at femininity and like feminine approaches to sexuality as being cute, sweet, but not badass, right? Not cool, not liberated. And so then women are kind of stuck in this position where they can kind of do either one, but it's been made clear to them that if they want to be considered a cool girl, then hooking up is what to do.
Yeah. All right. I got a few questions here, maybe dispelling some misconceptions of hookup culture. One is that somehow, right, women are less good at hooking up than the fellas. What do you think?
Okay, this is a big stereotype, right? That women just don't like casual sex. I mean, it goes back to this stereotype I just talked about masculine approaches to sexuality. Look, there's no way to know if women are less biologically attuned to be casual about sex than men. We would have to do an experiment that would be extremely unethical to find this out, which would mean taking people out of culture and experiences. So we don't know. But what I do know is that because hookup culture is framed as masculine, there is an assumption that women are worse at it. And that assumption that women are worse at it, I mean, imagine competing in a game where everyone just thinks you're bad at it, no matter what happens. And so what happens is, no matter how casual a woman is about sex and hookup culture, if she's hooking up with men, the men are going to assume that she wants to be in a relationship with them. They just don't buy it, right? And if men are assuming that every woman they have sex with wants to be in a relationship with them, then they start stiff-arming all these women, right? They're like, don't get feelings, because I know you're getting feelings. And then the women are like, no, I'm not stupid, weak, kind of feminine girl. I'm a badass. I don't have feelings for you. So then they start stiff-arming the men, too. And it creates this dynamic where everyone's sort of like really aggressively pretending they have no feelings for the other person, whether they do or not. But if you're a woman in this situation, having everyone you're sleeping with assume that they're getting something from you that you don't actually want to give them feels bad. So I had a student, for example, she was hooking up with a guy. She didn't have feelings for him. He falls for someone else. He very nicely brings her to a picnic table and explains that they can't hook up anymore because he's fallen for this other girl. And she's like, oh, well, that's kind of you to tell me, because that's not typical. And then he says, but I'm so sorry I did this to you. I really didn't mean to hurt you. And she's like, oh, I'm fine. And he's like, you're really lovable. Like you will find love someday. And she's like, oh, but I'm fine. And he keeps going and going. And she says in her diary, she says, I never realized that all the men I was hooking up with assumed they had all the power, and that I was the one who was powerless. But that's exactly what she learned in that moment. And it is that unequal gender dynamic. It's that asymmetry that makes is part of what makes it less pleasant for women.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just honestly trying to wrap my head around all of this. It's so interesting because I definitely see and have experienced some parallels in the queer community as well. This kind of stiff arming when it comes to emotional intimacy and vulnerability, really leading with sex, sort of leading with this concept of desirability, right? Of like wanting to be liked. And if I can give someone sexual pleasure or gratification or be kind of accepted, liked in that way, then somehow maybe I'm going to be more likable in a relationship context. Oh my God, there's so much here. I don't know how you managed all the research. I have one misconception here that I wanted to touch on, where I think you just alluded to it, that somehow men are less inclined, or yes, they're not as great at emotional connection as women.
They may have less practice because of the way we raise boys versus girls.
Very true.
But I will tell you from these diaries, you know, it's one thing to sit down and do an interview and ask somebody how they're feeling on that day. But to have someone get into the habit on a weekly basis reflecting on their experiences with sex and dating and parties and friendship, week after week after week, it gets deeper and deeper. They get more and more comfortable, and you start to see trajectories in their emotional lives. And I will say that, most of the men I study, queer and straight, are full of feelings. And they're falling for people, and they want something healthy and, that isn't so stressful. Most students, even the ones that are really enthusiastic about hooking up, are interested in a relationship if that comes along. So these young people are being expected to shut emotions down, but they're full of emotion almost universally.
Yeah.
Boys and girls.
That makes a lot of sense. And I'm curious about almost this replacement of sexual intimacy with emotional intimacy, right? It's almost like if we can connect in that way, if we can feel something in that way, I don't think it's just about, however you're defining hookup, if it's like a strong makeout session, if clothes are coming off, if there's something more happening, it's almost like we just want to feel that connection. And so sometimes that's maybe easier than using our words or actually going on a date, or maybe it's more convenient. I think a lot of this is about convenience as well. This kind of, I don't owe anyone anything kind of thing. This, right? I don't want to bring anyone in. I don't want to ask for anyone for anything kind of mentality. And so as we're looking to find belonging and connection, maybe this is one way we do it.
It's hookup culture very nicely, its evolution very nicely also matches the introduction of what we call neoliberal politics and economics. So as, around the same time, starting in 1980, is when our American, the political order starts shifting away from the social safety net. Let's have a big middle class that we get after the Great Depression. In the 1980s, we start saying, no, government is the problem, right? That's what Reagan said. And so we start thinking, let's rip up the social safety net. Everybody's in it for themselves. Compete as individuals in a so-called free market. And if there's winners and losers, oh well, right? And this freedom from mutual obligation and accountability becomes part of our culture more broadly. And it's absolutely what you see in hookup culture. These are neoliberal sexualities being nurtured.
Oh my gosh. This is so fascinating because I've always said we live and date within systems, right? Political systems, of course, economic systems, cultural systems, which include our media. It's all interconnected. We don't exist in these just isolation tunnels, and we don't date in isolation or in these vacuums as if none of this has impacted us, at least subconsciously.
Yep. Yeah. So we want to say, what's wrong with these kids, right?
Yeah.
No, that's not the question. It's what kind of culture have we thrust upon them?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think regardless of where you are in the world, if you're in the U.S., in Europe, Australia, Asia, Africa, South America, did I get them all? Antarctica? Yeah, Africa. I think I said Africa. I think there's going to be a lot of the Flirties are going to be able to relate to a lot of this conversation, and regardless of age too, right? You don't have to be a freshman on campus on an American university to really see all of this playing out in dating. All right, I want to go back to something you mentioned a few moments ago where I think the statistic you mentioned was about a third of people aren't participating in hookup culture. And so where does that leave them? If we're using hookup culture as a way to meet people to form relationships, what do you do when you don't fit into this?
Yeah, sort of the big picture in terms of participation and enjoyment that you see in all of the literature that's come out is probably about 20% of students love hookup culture. It's the best thing that's ever happened to them. Okay. They are in heaven. This number tends to go down over the 4 years. It starts maybe about 25, ends at about 15. Yeah. But there are some that are absolutely thriving. the plurality of students, somewhere around 40%, they are ambivalent about it. They're participating, but they're having mixed experiences. Then about a third are not participating at all, and there's always a handful who are fully excluded, who would like to participate, but somehow can't crack that open. And so that 30%, often they find themselves sort of socially isolated in general, because especially freshman year, so much of socializing is about the big parties, and the big parties are about hooking up. And if you're not interested in that, then often you just don't participate. And the students who are partying and are hooking up take up so much psychic space, in the dorm floor when everybody's getting ready to go out on the first night of the weekend, Wednesday, right? Yeah. It's like loud and noisy, and everybody's chatting and talking and pre-gaming and drinking and putting on makeup and getting dressed and checking out outfits. They take up a lot of psychic space. Yeah. Whereas the students who aren't doing that, often they don't even know about each other. Because they're just not making themselves really visible. So there's a lot of isolation. If you're not hooking up, then you're probably not as fun. You're not going to the parties. You're not doing the pre-conversation about who you want to hook up with and who you want to avoid. The post-conversation, what happened last night, what did we do? You have less to contribute to that conversation. So there is some social isolation, and also the decline in the likelihood of getting into a relationship. But I will make one exception to that rule.
Okay.
I've been studying hookup culture a long time, and I think the people that are having the best sex in college are probably the nerdiest of the nerds. The nerdiest of the nerds are I'm not interested in any of this drinking at frat parties. No, thank you. Right. And then they're finding each other, and they're playing Magic the Gathering, and they're getting to know one another, and they are having something more akin to they're having sex with their friends.
Yes.
And then that actually makes easing into relationships possibly better, or at least heightens the accountability a little bit, if you're having sex with a friend versus someone you might never see again. So I think those kids are the luckiest ones in terms of sex and dating on campus.
You know what, Dr. Wade? I think you're onto something. It reminds me of the scene from American Pie, right? One time at band camp, I think, probably having the kinkiest, best sex of them all.
The only student in all of that research of the 101 that made me blush was just didn't care about fashion, didn't care about her hairdo, nerdy girl who was systematically deflowering every nerd boy she could find.
Oh my God.
And she was having a great time.
If that is not girl power, I don't know what it is. But this is just a great transition because one of the questions I have here was just I'm trying to sort of wrap my mind around the girl power movement, sort of this sexual revolution, this even my body, my choice, this mentality of sex positivity, right? I can go out and have sex, whatever that looks like to me, without having this attachment to, oh, now I'm going to be slut shamed, or now it means something about myself that isn't perhaps so healthy, or whatever society's going to say. Or I can go out and have sex, and then I can have sex with someone else the next night or the next weekend. I can go out and have sex, and I don't have to be in a relationship with this person. I don't even have to date them. And so I think there's been certainly some positive shifts, and we've been talking about that so far, but how, or at least touching on them, but how do you sort of rationalize, I'm trying to, in my mind, sort of frame sex positivity with just this rampant maybe hookup culture where if you're having sex with different people every weekend, I don't know, Dr. Wade. I'm not sure if I would classify that as sex positivity.
Well, think about it this way. So because of the way that we conflated male lifestyles, stereotypical male lifestyles, with freedom for women. So that was the freedom we got offered. That's what was on offer, is if we're free, quote unquote, to act like boys in relation to sex. We're still allowed to be girlish about it, but we are free to act like boys. But the freedom that we got was, a negative freedom, not bad, but just an absence of constraints. It was a freedom from interference, freedom from judgment, right?
Okay.
But we didn't get a positive freedom. We didn't get any sort of structure set up to to support us as sexual people, to support us as people in this environment. So we were free, but we weren't free and. We weren't free and equal. We weren't free and in an environment of care and mutual, accountability. We weren't free and supported to like explore and discover in a safe way. I mean, you can imagine a hookup culture that is different than the one we have, where everybody is really, really nice to each other. And like maintains relationships and like checks in all the time, where consent is on script instead of off script, right? Where you can imagine an extremely feminine hookup culture where it's still casual. And, we're not supposed to be forming relationships, but in the moment when we're together, we're very kind and caring, and the sex is mutual, and everyone has orgasms. We can imagine this. But that's not what we got. And so we got to be free from, but we didn't get to be free to. We didn't get free to explore our sexualities, for example, in a kind environment where we were considered equals as women.
That is so interesting. All right. I want to ask you now just maybe about some cultural specificities with this study, where a lot of American campuses have dorm life, right? There's a huge party life where there's a lot of drinking, underage drinking. There's going to be some drug use, even if it's just marijuana, which is illegal in a lot of places now, but still, right? It's a drug, just as is alcohol. And so I'm curious how all of this, just like that kind of dorm life, that party life, plays into this.
It's huge.
Okay.
So really at colleges that don't have residential life, where there aren't any residence halls, we really don't necessarily see hookup cultures. It's specific to schools with residence halls. And it's exacerbated if the school has a really big Greek life, that exacerbates it because it becomes like this epicenter of it. Schools that attract more white and wealthy students are more likely to have more vibrant hookup cultures, because students who are coming from more disadvantaged backgrounds don't necessarily feel comfortable spending as much time socializing, or don't have the money to spend as much time socializing, or they're living at home instead of living in the dorms.
Okay.
So it is, these hookup cultures are most vibrant when we have big Greek life, a lot of white and wealthy students, and residence life, which is why we don't really see it in Europe, because they don't really have the dorms there. And so something different is happening elsewhere.
Okay. So we got to touch on now, as a part of this conversation, consent and boundaries, and even a little bit of this surveillance culture we have with social media, and just the digital age we're in, where I imagine you saw in your research and looking through these journal entries and just throughout your career, where sometimes like hookup culture can be used against us, or we feel like we might be forced into those situations, yes, where consent isn't always built in. Like I'm thinking about Greek life. We've seen some of those just big time news stories where, right, like there might be male on female sexual violence, male on male sexual violence, like in the fraternities as a hazing ritual. And so how that plays into this wider conversation.
Well, I think this question gets back to that umbrella cause that I was mentioning at the beginning of the conversation. So if we have a hookup culture that's organized around stereotypically male traits, then what we have also is a exclusion of stereotypically female traits.
Okay.
And one of those traits is care.
Okay.
Caring about other people, caring about their consent, caring about their pleasure, caring about their comfort, right? So it is off script in the hookup cultures we have on campuses to be caring when one is having sex with somebody in a hookup. So much so that like they try to avoid any kissing that's too tender, any caressing or eye contact of any meaningful kind.
Yeah.
Like the whole point is for the sex to be hot, but not warm.
Okay.
So if you have a whole community that is enacting carelessness and trying to show that they're not weak and pathetic and feminine, they're badass and boyish, then you're not supposed to display any care. And then what kind of environment is that for a consent culture.
Right.
Because asking for someone's consent means you care about what they want.
Absolutely.
Giving them pleasure is like, I want you to be happy. I care about you being happy. And so this imperative to be careless about sex doesn't just create this carefreeness, this freedom from, but it creates this like sort of toxic carelessness in general. And I think the drinking relates to that, right? The drinking, the frat party. I mean, frat parties are supposed to be wild, right? We're supposed to be throwing our cares to the wind and going crazy. And so it's the perfect, it fits with this bigger narrative about we're not supposed to worry about anything or anybody but ourselves.
Yeah. I'm not in a fraternity, never have been, but I've seen Old School. I've seen National Lampoon, and I think about like when I just first started college, I was like, honestly, Dr. Wade, I was shocked. Like, I did not drink in high school. I did not use drugs in high school. I was very much a goody-goody two-shoes, right? By the book, doing my work, just trying to get into the best school I possibly could. And the second I started college, I could not believe it. Like, I could not believe it. All the time, everywhere you looked, everything was centered around drinking, around drugs, around partying, around sex, who's hooking up with who thinks who is hot. And what you talked about a moment ago, if you don't have access to those spaces, or you don't feel like you belong in them because maybe you aren't drinking or you're sober, or you don't want to participate in hookup culture, like the access piece is like, just because it's there doesn't mean that you're a part of it.
Yeah. A party school's social life is kind of organized around recklessness.
Yeah.
And so that's what the sex is like too.
So where do we go from here, Dr. Wade? What are some of the conclusions that you drew from your research?
Okay, well, I'll give you a few. I mean, everyone wants advice for individuals, and I'll give that. And I'll give an answer that's about more sociological too, and then I have one more direction to go in. But so, the advice for individuals is to trust your feelings. That you don't have to participate. There's nothing wrong with you if you don't like it. That you should feel. Even though it's really hard and scary, you have the best way to get what you want is to tell somebody.
Okay.
And if they reject you because you want something that's not on the script, consider it a dodged bullet. At the institutional level, students can organize and try to change the cultures on their campuses. They can try to get the institution to give less priority and privilege to fraternities. They can ask for resources so that they can build sexual cultures that could compete with hookup culture on campus. There's a world in which there's multiple competing sexual cultures on a campus, and people get to pick which one they want to play with for a while, more like a menu. But then I want to add that I'm not sure how long hookup culture is going to last.
Please say more. I'm thinking the same thing, yeah.
Well, remember I said it was tied to neoliberalism and this definition of women's liberation is to do what men do. All of this is changing right now. So we have this like neoconservative movement that is happening and the collapse of neoliberalism. Like there's nothing about Trump that is like consistent with a neoliberal political or economic system. Right. We are, as a society, having these big macro changes that are leading us somewhere new. And the sexual culture, the youth sexual culture, as it always does, is going to shift.
Yeah.
And so we're already in that transition. Yeah. And we have the invention, right, of AI and all of our added capacity with online digital interaction. I don't know what's coming, but I think sometime in the next 10 to 20 years, my book might be history.
There's just going to have to be a part 2. There's going to have to be American Hookup, the sequel. What comes next?
I'm there for it. Yep.
I think it'll always be relevant because it captured a moment in time, which, was, a moment that was decades, right? Really captured how dating and relationships and sex played out on American campuses, which we see play out all over the world and even in our adult lives, and how we form relationships and how we date, really leading with sometimes with sex, kind of this sacrificing of one's needs, of emotional intimacy, really to kind of be desirable, to be liked, right? And leading with sex, or really focusing on physical attraction, physical chemistry is the lowest hanging fruit, right? It's just the easiest, it's the easiest thing to do. And I think we're in a shift as well. Just all this research about how Gen Z is having less sex. I think they're a little bit like pressing pause. I'm encouraged by a lot of the Flirties are in that demographic, asking questions about dating and relationships, flirting, getting off their phones, getting off the apps, going out in the world and really centering themselves in their dating lives, in their relationships. What do I want, right? What do I value? What's true for me? Yeah.
But I would encourage you not to frame it as something better will come. Okay, I would just encourage you to frame it as something different will come.
Something different. Yeah.
Something different will come. I mean, a lot of what you are talking about actually is kind of a throwback to that going steady kind of way of being together.
Everything is in a cycle, right?
And then people thought, oh, hookup culture is better because we're free. We're not like, we have birth control now. It's much better. But so that's we want in our heart of hearts to believe that our societies are just on an upward trajectory and things are just getting better all the time in all kinds of ways, sexuality and equality included. But that's not how it works. It's going to be something new, something different, something that shocks and horrifies grown-ups. But it's probably not going to be straightforwardly better. It'll be both better and worse, probably.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for that reframe. Something different. Yes, it'll be that.
Yeah.
It'll definitely be different. This has been a fantastic conversation, Dr. Lisa Wade. Thank you so much for being on the show today. We're going to start to wrap things up here. Just any final thoughts for the Flirties? Anything else on your mind?
Well, I think that my point about saying out loud what you want and reframing rejection as a dodged bullet is really important. Trusting your gut, knowing that like sex is imbued with all of our cultural promises and perils, just like everything else. Yeah. And so whatever you're being told about, what is the right way to be, just take it with a grain of salt.
All right. We're going to end there. My only other question, I want to send all the Flirties your way to pick up the book you've got a website. I mean, you're a practicing professor. If they're going to Tulane, they could take one of your classes, right?
I'm teaching sex in college this fall.
Oh my gosh. Is it online perhaps? Can I sign up? No, it's in person. No Zoom classes for you. Well, what's some of the stuff on, or can you say that's on your syllabus? What are some of the things you're going to be focusing on?
Oh, well, we do, youth sexual cultures and like the evolution of youth sexual cultures. We talk about the various layers. What does it mean for hooking up to be a culture as opposed to a behavior? So we talk about like the ideology, the ideas behind it, the interactional scripts, and like the institutionalization. And then I introduced this idea of care and the gendered nature of it as a sort of overarching framework and how that ties into some of these crises. And then I'm excited. I'm gonna do little bits of real sex education in there just to give them some pragmatic and practical stuff. Awesome. And then I'm gonna close on the what's coming next question.
Awesome. All right, Flirties, even if you can't take the class, you can add to your reading list American Hookup, The New Culture of Sex on Campus by Dr. Lisa Wade. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Benjamin.
All right, Flirties, that's a wrap on this episode of Flirtations, the Hookup Culture episode of the program with Dr. Lisa Wade, author of the book American Hookup, The New Culture of Sex on campus, assistant professor at Tulane University, and a fellow sociologist. I love this conversation. Had so many just new takeaways, interesting points that I am going to contemplate and just think about for a little while. Thank you, Dr. Wade, for being on the show today. And thank you to the Flirties for listening. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as well and found it interesting. I think if you're out there dating, you're probably going to encounter a lot of what we talked about, even if you're actively participating in hookup culture, even if you're not, right? What does hookup culture mean to you? Yes, hope you just loved it. Thank you so much for listening, for being here, for checking out the show. Please rate, review, subscribe if you haven't already. If you have, thank you so much. If you haven't, hit subscribe, hit review, 5 stars, a comment, a thumbs up, wherever you're listening, maybe even, watching. You can now watch all episodes on YouTube, including this one. So thank you so much for being here. Signing off officially at Flirt Headquarters. Oh, share this episode or another favorite episode with a friend, someone you want to share some BFE, Big Flirt Energy with. All right, now I've checked all my boxes. Signing off officially. My name is Benjamin. I'm the Flirt Coach and Gay Libra Flirty. Happy flirting.